What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into the latest episode of the Sparkin over Denver Broncos podcast. It is just after 10 o'clock on a beautiful Wednesday evening at the time of recording this here in the mile high city of Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Gage Madrid. Thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in, everybody who has liked, everybody who has commented, everybody who has subscribed, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it, guys. Those are all free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out to fellow members of Broncos country just like you and me. So, we actually had a pretty decent slate of news today, guys. So I'm just pulling up my notes here to make sure that we've got everything all together. But before we get into that, guys, this is the Sparkin over Broncos podcast. So we do have a J rolled up here of some Purple Punch. I'm going to get that guy sparked up right now, and we can officially spark up this conversation. All right, guys, this is a really tasty strain here. Got some nice woody floral notes, but also has some sweetness and some berry notes at the end. Very tasty and some very indica heavy leaning effects. Absolutely delicious, guys. All right, let's get this guy officially sparked up here. All right, let's roll. All right, guys. So, the Denver Broncos officially have a new kicker. They have their replacement for Brandon McManus. The team has signed Elliott Fry. Fry initially came into the NFL in 2019, and he has appeared in regular season games in 2021 for the Atlanta Falcons, Kansas City Chiefs, and Cincinnati Bengals. On his career, he's attempted 6 field goals, going 5-4-6, and 83.3% field goal percentage. His longest field goal was 43 yards. Uh-oh. Cat, no. Cat, no. Cat, no. Cat, no. As far as extra points are concerned, he is a perfect 5 for 5. And in 8 weeks with the Orlando Apollos of the Alliance of American Football League, he went 14 for 14 on all of his field goal attempts. Now, the Broncos held an open competition throughout OTAs for their kicking spot. They brought in 3 kickers: Elliott Fry, Brett Maher, the former Dallas Cowboys kicker, and Parker White, who had most recently been with the Green Bay Packers. And ultimately, it was Elliott Fry who came away with the job. I personally feel like this is an interesting decision by Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, and I feel like it bodes the question, should the Denver Broncos bring in another kicker to compete with Elliott Fry, or do you feel like this is Elliott Fry's job to lose? I personally thought that Brett Maher was going to be the kicker that the Denver Broncos brought in, but ultimately they ended up going with Fry. It's going to be really interesting to see what ultimately separated Brett Maher from Elliott Fry, because Brett Maher has a big leg, and he's played with Sean Payton before when he was with the New Orleans Saints. So you would have thought that that would have been a little bit more conducive to kicking in the mile-high air. But at the end of the day, the Broncos elected to go in the direction of Elliott Fry. So I wouldn't exactly rule out the Broncos bringing in Brett Maher as competition, and the Broncos could let them hash it out in training camp and the preseason, and may the best kicker win. I feel like competition at all spots is a very good thing, especially on a Denver Broncos team that's trying to reset the culture and reset pretty much everything in the locker room in the first year of the Sean Payton era. The reason for this, I would absolutely, or because of this, I would absolutely welcome competition at the kicking position, and I would not be surprised at all if Brett Maher was brought in to at least compete with Elliott Fry. But at the end of the day, if the Broncos do end up sticking with Elliott Fry at the kicking position, I feel like they could be in a good spot. You've got to remember, Brandon McManus was a little bit more of an under-the-radar kicker when he first arrived in the Mile High City, and he ended up becoming one of the best kickers to ever grace this city. I know that that's not exactly the most popular opinion, and I do feel like it was the right time to move on from McManus, given some of his sideline antics and just an overall decline in performance over the past few years. Although he was the last member of our Super Bowl 50 team, I feel like it was time to move on from Brandon McManus. And I do feel like Elliott Fry could fill that role amicably for the Denver Broncos in relief of Brandon McManus. But at the same time, I would also very much welcome some competition at the kicking spot. So, that was not the only signing that the Denver Broncos made today. They also announced that they have signed former Tennessee Titans tight end Tommy Hudson. Now, Hudson initially signed with the Titans as an undrafted free agent in 2020. Unfortunately, injuries have kind of plagued his career, and he spent both the 2020 and the 2022 season on injured reserve. My J went out. But in 2021, he did play in 5 games for the Tennessee Titans and bounced on and off their practice squad. He was targeted 6 times and caught 3 catches for 31 yards. I gotta go take care of my cat again. Sorry, guys. Get down, cat. You do not need to be up there. I know you're hungry, but no. Gee whiz. Man, I feel like I need to get a squirt bottle or something for that cat. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. So Tommy Hudson caught 6 passes, or was targeted 6 times, caught 3 passes for 31 yards, 10.3 yards per catch. At this point in time, he's going to have to really fight pretty hard to make the Denver Broncos roster. In fact, if we pull up our depth chart here at the tight end position, it currently consists of Greg Dulcich as tight end 1, Chris Manhertz as tight end 2. He figures to be a key factor in our run game this upcoming season as a blocking tight end. Then we traded for Adam Troutman from the New Orleans Saints, so he should be our next option in terms of the receiving game at the tight end position. And then we've got Alberto, Nate Adkins, who was an undrafted free agent this past year, and Tommy Hudson. All of those guys figure to compete for the 4th tight end spot for the Denver Broncos. And it's going to be interesting to see if they carry 4 tight ends on the active roster, or if they want to go 3 tight ends on the active and 1 tight end on the practice squad. Because although for the past few years we have carried 4 tight ends, one of them was Andrew Beck, who is a hybrid tight end fullback, and instead we have a pure fullback on the roster this year in Michael Burton. So it's going to be really interesting to see the direction that the Denver Broncos want to go with the tight end position. And regardless, be it if it's going to be for a spot on the active roster or the practice squad, the final spot is going to be a 3-way competition between Alberto, Nate Adkins, and Tommy Hudson. Now, unfortunately, given the fact that the Broncos did sign 2 players today, they had to make 2 cuts to get their roster back down to 90 players. So they felt that they needed to add depth, obviously, at the kicker position and at the tight end position as well. And they felt that one of the positions that they were strong at was the running back position. So it was announced today that the Denver Broncos have cut former XFL leading rusher Jacques Patrick, or Jacques Patrick, I believe it's actually pronounced, and Tyreek McAllister. So McAllister was kind of an interesting story. The Broncos initially signed him to a futures contract this past offseason. Then earlier in April, he was waived by the Broncos and shortly thereafter was brought back. But now that the Broncos needed to get back down to 90 players, he was the guy who ultimately had to walk the plank. And same goes for Jacques Patrick. I mean, that one did come as a little bit of a surprise to me, but at the same time, he's more of a physical runner and a powerful runner than he is a speedy and explosive runner. And right now at the running back position, we've got Javonte Williams. And while we're on that subject, some incredible news about Javonte Williams, guys. He was participating in practice at OTAs for the Denver Broncos. An absolutely stunning development as he recovers from a multi-ligament knee injury. If you guys remember, in Week 4 against the Las Vegas Raiders last year, he tore his ACL, LCL, and posterior lateral corner in his knee. A serious injury that obviously knocked knocked him out for the remainder of last year. And as somebody who has suffered a serious injury like that myself, I was very worried that he wasn't going to be ready to go. That he wasn't going to be ready to go for week 1. But he ultimately does seem to be trending in the right direction to be ready to go for week 1, which is an absolutely stunning development. Sean Payton said that right now his participation in practice is limited, but the Broncos media is not allowed to report on practice live. No more live tweets on practice or anything of that nature. That's per Sean Payton's new media policy to eliminate outside media distractions and negative media publicity. But it was shown that Javonte Williams, in a video that the team released, that Javonte Williams had a big bulky brace on his right knee, but he was running and cutting and participating at least in individual drills. I don't know if he got any like 11-on-11 action or anything like that. That's probably nothing we're going to find out from the media right now because of Sean Payton's new policy. But regardless, the fact that he was out there with a football helmet on at this point in time in his recovery gives me all the confidence in the world that Javonte Williams is going to be ready to go for week 1. But if we come over here, guys, and we take a look at the Denver Broncos running back depth chart, Javonte obviously is listed as our starter. Then we've got Samaje Perine behind him, who was kind of signed to be an insurance policy for Javonte Williams and sort of a third down back. He can be an excellent pass protector in this offense, and he's a guy who will bring those tough-earned 5-yard runs. He said that himself. That's the best part of his game. Then we've got Tony Jones Jr., who we signed as a free agent. He was previously with the Seattle Seahawks, and before that, he was with the New Orleans Saints. So he's got experience in this Sean Payton offense. But Tony Jones Jr. is a guy that I feel like is more going to see the field in special teams situations for the Denver Broncos than actually see any snaps on offense. He may see some snaps, but not many. Then we've got Demarie Crockett on the roster, the running back from Missouri, former teammate of Drew Lock and Albert O at Mizzou. He tore his ACL last offseason, so it's going to be interesting to see if he works his way back into the mix. But behind him is where the competition gets really interesting at the running back position for me. Currently, what the Broncos are lacking at the running back position is a speedy, explosive back who has the opportunity and poses the threat to take the ball to the house at any given time. That's something we just don't have right now. And we have 2 running backs on our roster that I feel like are really going to compete for that role. And that is Tyler Beatty, and he was somebody that we signed as a free agent last year after he got cut by the Baltimore Ravens. And then Jaleel McLaughlin, undrafted free agent this past season from Youngstown State. McLaughlin's a guy I really feel like has the best chance to make the roster as an undrafted free agent amongst all the undrafted free agents. But Tyler Beatty also looked really good for the Denver Broncos in the final 2 games. Especially in that Chargers game, he looked really explosive, and he ripped off a couple of really nice runs, including one for a touchdown, I believe. So Tyler Beatty could be a dark horse to make the roster, but Jaleel McLaughlin really sticks out to me, man. He reminds me a lot of Phillip Lindsay, but in my opinion, more of a threat in the passing game than Phillip Lindsay was. He's got better hands, in my opinion, and just poses a stronger threat in the passing game than Phillip Lindsay did. That's not a knock on Phillip Lindsay. If you guys have seen my recording studio, I've got Phillip Lindsay's jersey hanging up on the wall behind me. He's one of my favorite players to ever put on a Broncos uniform, but I can also acknowledge the shortcomings in his game. So Jaleel McLaughlin is the guy that I would definitely keep an eye on for the Denver Broncos at the running back position to really break out as a speedy, dynamic, explosive threat. And now that's going to be a lot easier with 2 running backs being cut in Jaquez Patrick and Tyreek McAllister. All right, guys. So now I want to dive into a subject here that well, it's kind of a follow-up to a video that I made on my main channel, Denver Broncos Syndicate. In fact, I'm probably going to put this out as its own like standalone video here on the Syndicate. In fact, I'm probably going to finish off this little doinkaroo here, because that's not something I definitely don't want to bring onto the Syndicate. All right. So, I want to address a little follow-up here to a video that I made a few days ago regarding Russell Wilson and KJ Wright. Now, if you'll remember, I went on a pretty long-winded rant about Russell Wilson's former teammates, basically going on various media platforms and talking a bunch of crap and allowing their personal bias and displeasure with Russell Wilson to seep in and affect their coverage that, at least on national media platforms, is supposed to be subjective. I have no problem with you voicing your displeasure on your own podcast, i.e. Richard Sherman, but if you're going to go on Good Morning Football like former Seahawks linebacker KJ Wright did, I do feel like you should probably at least keep your opinions somewhat objective, but that's not what the nature of that show really is anymore. It used to be, but not anymore. So, I feel like this was an example of... So I feel like for me, this was a big lesson to learn in my early stages of my sports journalism career. I'm taking, obviously, a non-traditional path with it, as I don't have media credentials. I never went to journalism school. I'm trying to approach it on the YouTube platform and really trying to break out and establish myself on the YouTube platform as my main platform to cover the Denver Broncos on. So in doing so, I rely on quite a bit of secondary information, articles from other media sources who do have direct access to the team that I don't have, so on and so forth. And I also rely on tweets a lot that I see on the internet to get information that I use to bring to you guys ultimately here on the YouTube platform. I almost think of it sort of as like the sports report on the news, if you will. And this tweet that I saw crossed my eyes from, I believe it was Dov Kleiman. He does a bunch of NFL breaking news updates and stuff on Twitter. He's just a really good source for mass information that I ultimately can bring to you guys. And he tweeted a clip of KJ Wright's appearance on the Good Morning Football podcast, where KJ basically said that this trade has the chance to go down as the biggest trade heist of all time. Now, obviously, you could see why that would stir up Broncos country, because I don't feel like this has the chance to go down as the worst trade heist of all time. This will never beat the Herschel Walker trade. Frankly, I feel like the Deshaun Watson trade has the potential to go down as even worse than the Russell Wilson trade for the Denver Broncos. But it could also, it seems in year one to have backfired in the Denver Broncos' face. Here's hoping with Sean Payton now being here that will no longer be the case, but only time will tell. However, what was failed to be mentioned here in this video that was posted on Twitter, and a lot of articles that I've seen on the internet talking about this subject, is right before KJ said this, he also significantly praised Russell Wilson. He said that Broncos country is in good hands with Russell Wilson and that he's got the opportunity to be the comeback player of the year next year. But last year, it was not good enough, and if we see a repeat of last year, it could go down as the worst trade heist of all time. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that statement, but that's a lot better than him just coming out and saying that this could be the worst trade heist of all time and just crapping on Russell Wilson without giving him any compliments or any of his due respect that he absolutely deserves. And KJ did that, and I did not see that KJ did that, and I want to acknowledge that I was wrong in that situation to completely crap on KJ without hearing the full context of the conversation and without hearing the full reasoning behind why he said what he said. And I was wrong in making that assumption that he was intending on slandering Russell Wilson, and he probably low-key was, but it wasn't as blatant and as bad as I thought it was initially, just based on hearing the minute and 30-second clip on Twitter. Once I went and actually listened to the full, 3 or 4 minutes of what he said on Russell Wilson, KJ Wright actually sounded completely rational and wasn't like Richard Sherman, who has gone on and repeatedly attacked Russell Wilson on a personal level, both on his podcast and on national media platforms. So, I mean, this for me was a big lesson to learn here as I continue to go into my sports coverage career. And I want to apologize to any of my viewers here that may have been misled by that information. I am going to keep that video up. I don't really believe in deleting videos unless it's something just absolutely false. I don't feel like this was absolutely false. But I did want to at least address a bit of a follow-up to that video and kind of go into why I was wrong to make assumptions before I had the full side of the story and I had all bits of information that I needed to make a sound decision. So, a lesson learned there and something that I will strive to be better at as I go forward in my media career. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Sparkin' Over Denver Broncos podcast. I really appreciate you. Be sure to leave a like on the video. It really helps me out, as well as comment and subscribe. Again, those are all free and easy ways to help tell YouTube to push us out to fellow members of Broncos country. And it's really, really a key way to help us out, guys. So I would really, really appreciate it. And until next time, guys, this has been another episode of the Sparkin' Over Broncos podcast, the show where we spark conversation about our Denver Broncos. I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.